I'm David Mercer, 42, Chicago. At 9:47 p.m., 2 knocks and a pause. I opened the door with the chain still on. Mr. Mercer? Officer Grant, Officer Hayes. Sir, your wife is at Northwestern Memorial. Detroit should have been the word on my porch. That's where Claire said she'd be. Conference, panels, name badges. Instead, the officers said Chicago and a hotel I could picture from Lakeshore, the lakefront. Then the phrase that hollowed the hallway, with a male companion, not colleague, not friend, companion. The elevator ride up was quiet in my head, like snow before a plow. Room 412 would come later. For now, there was the cold on my bare feet, the smell of takeout cooling on the counter, and the split second where a husband becomes an historian, collecting times, places, words that don't match. I didn't shout, didn't beg. I watched their mouths form careful syllables and felt something lock into place. If this is the truth, I'll carry it standing up. And I won't lie to my kids. Officer Grant drove. Officer Hayes rode in back with me like he was guarding a witness, not a husband. Chicago slid by in winter glass. Bus stops, a closed pizza place, a dad in a hoodie walking a dog. I stared at the glove box and counted my breaths. Men my age learn to breathe through bad news, layoffs, diagnoses, phone calls at 2 a.m. The squad radio crackled, and I remembered Claire's calendar invite. Detroit, keynote, panels. I pictured the tote bag she loved, the one with a broken strap. Is she? I couldn't say the word. Grant kept his eyes on the road. She's alive. Alive did a strange thing in my chest. It didn't comfort. It complicated. I texted my sister. Keep the kids tonight. I'll call in the morning. Hayes handed me a small bottle of water. I didn't drink. When the hospital sign finally rose out of the dark, I felt it. The night had already chosen a side, and it wasn't mine. Northwestern smells like sanitizer and coffee that's given up. A nurse met us and led me to a small room with a couch that knew too many families. Dr. Linda Collins walked in with the face I've seen on coaches and pastors, the one that delivers truth without breaking it. Mr. Mercer, your wife has a broken wrist, a concussion, and significant bruising. She's stable and sedated. Stable is a word you can't hug. I nodded like a man agreeing to terms he didn't read. Dr. Collins kept going, careful, measured, human. We're monitoring brain swelling. Vitals are good. Good is another word that doesn't feel like itself after midnight. She handed me a paper wristband as if belonging to the building might steady me. It didn't. I asked, was there a robbery? Wrong room? The pause before her answer said everything. A detective will explain what we know. The door clicked, and the couch seemed to tilt. Facts were coming. My story was leaving. Detective Harris introduced himself and sat forward like he wanted to make sure I caught every syllable. He confirmed the hotel, the lakefront, and then said the part that empties a room even when 2 people are still in it. She checked in with a male companion, Mark Caldwell. He supervises her team at Sterling Marketing. I heard the consonants of his name before I took in the meaning. Supervises, team, the office place I've heard about over dinners, client deadlines, budget dramas, now felt like a doorway I'd been kept on the porch of. Tuesday evenings, Thursday evenings, regular guests. I thought about her shoes by the door at home, scuffed in a way conferences don't cause. Harris slid a form across the table, asked if I recognized the name. I didn't, not truly. I recognized the shape of a life replacing mine. When he said, "Any questions?" I surprised myself. "Yes. Is she safe from him here?" He nodded. The word safe felt fragile, like thin glass. I've flown to Detroit. I know the gate numbers, the smell of Coney dogs near baggage claim. I know the hotel Claire said she booked, points, status, late checkout. The detective's timeline pushed all of that into a drawer labeled fiction. Tuesday wasn't a keynote or a dinner with clients. It was a room with a view of Lakeshore, and a man who didn't belong to my household budget or my Christmas card. I remembered the small changes, her perfume going bolder, the way she angled her phone on the counter, the sudden love for night runs she never used to take. Men like me try to explain away the drafts under the door. We add weather stripping and call it a day. I signed the form. Detective Harris slid back toward me. Then I asked one more question that mattered to a father with kids who have a first period bell. Can I see her before morning? He said yes. Relief and dread pulled the same rope. Room 412 hummed like a refrigerator at night. Claire's face was swollen, her hair matted at the temple, tape crossing skin like roads on a map I didn't want to drive. Her hand, ring finger bare, I registered it too late, rested near the rail in a cast. Machines kept time better than I could. I sat. I watched the rise and fall of a woman I could name but didn't recognize. Marriage has a sound. Keys in a bowl, the washing machine getting unbalanced, a kid yelling, "Can someone sign this?" Tonight had the sound of plastic and air. A nurse adjusted a line and asked if I was family. "Husband," I said. The word tasted like something I used to eat. I traced the edge of the visitor's chair with my thumb and thought of the kids' backpacks at home, lunch notes I still write, the dog that will wait at the door. I leaned in, not close enough to touch. "I'm here," I said. It meant everything and nothing. The diner across the street had cracked red booths and a waitress who looked like she'd been through enough nights to know when not to ask. I ordered coffee and didn't add sugar. The cup warmed my hands but did nothing for the cold that had moved in deeper than bone. A man at the end of the counter watched a late-game highlight on his phone. Someone laughed without joy. I took out a receipt from my wallet. Our anniversary dinner last year, the one with the overcooked steak Claire pretended to love. I turned it over and wrote 3 rules because I needed something I could keep when I'd just learned how much I couldn't. 1, I will not break. 2, I will tell my kids the truth in a way they can endure. 3, I will carry this standing up. The pen dug through the paper. When I looked up, the waitress had left the check and a quiet nod. I nodded back. A code is a kind of spine. Morning took its time. When it finally showed up in the window like a tired guest, I walked back to room 412. Claire's good eye opened. For a second, she looked like the woman who used to text me pictures of yard sale finds and bad office coffee. Then the weight returned to her face. "David," she whispered, "I'm sorry." People in our age bracket know the difference between sorry for the pain and sorry for the act. I stood at the foot of the bed, hands in my pockets so they wouldn't shake. "Which part?" I asked, and kept my voice even. Sorry for cheating, for lying about Detroit, or sorry because it landed here? The beeping didn't change tempo, but the air felt like it did. Tears came and I didn't move toward them. I wasn't unkind. I was done being recruited to manage someone else's consequences. She said my name again. I said, "You're safe. The doctor says you'll heal." Then I added the sentence I'd come to deliver. "We won't pretend." It comes in scripts. I've heard friends survive it. I've sat through men's breakfasts where we talk about storms. "We got routine," she said, voice small. "We stopped feeling new." Therapists exist for routine. Affairs exist for denial. I pulled the visitor chair back an inch and let my back find the support. "Claire, boredom is not a hall pass." Her eyes flashed with something familiar. Defense, pride, the need to win a point. "He made me feel seen," she tried. I glanced at the cast. "He made you a hospital bracelet." It wasn't a line meant to wound, it was a measurement. We live by measurements at our age. Blood pressure, mortgage rates, miles to empty. The nurse stepped in, checked numbers, left a kindness on the pillow with her hands. I stood. "I'll update the kids when they wake up." Her breath hitched. Don't tell them." I paused at the door. "We're out of lies," I said. The hinge squeaked like a truth we'd ignored. Hospitals have a certain kind of hallway where the floor wax shines enough to reflect a man he barely recognizes. I walked that hallway and let the night rerun, the porch, the radio, the word companion, the ringless hand. A volunteer offered me a banana like we were at mile 16 of a marathon. I almost laughed. I declined, sat on a padded bench, and scrolled photos on my phone. Sophie with braces coming off, Ethan's first base hit, Claire holding a sparkler last 4th of July. You can love the faces and grieve the facts at the same time. I texted my sister again. "I'll be home soon. Keep it normal. Pancakes help." Then I called my office manager to clear the day and heard my voice sound like someone who knows the difference between urgent and important. Before I left, I looked back toward 412. I didn't pray for reconciliation. I prayed for clarity and for the strength not to barter with the truth. Kitchen table, 2 bowls. The dog settled at my feet like he could feel the draft coming. Sophie and Ethan walked in with sleep still on their faces. I poured orange juice because it felt like something a steady father does. "Mom is in the hospital," I said, and I watched relief hit first. "She's alive," before fear asked its next question. "Is she okay?" "Physically, she'll heal," I said. I paused. "There's more." I spoke in the voice I use when teaching a teenager to merge onto the freeway. Calm, precise, no hidden turns. "Mom was not in Detroit. She was with someone from work." Silence is louder in a kitchen than in a church. Sophie's face broke. Ethan's jaw set like mine does when a bolt won't loosen. "So she lied," he said. "Yes," I answered, and put a hand on his shoulder. "I'm angry too, but we won't carry hate. It's heavy, and it leaks." We cried some, quietly. Then I said the part I promised. "No more lies. Ever." I sent the kids to brush their teeth and leaned on the counter, the place where we've signed permission slips and Christmas cards. The house had that morning light that makes even bad days look polite. I thought about work calls I'd miss, errands that wouldn't get run, the small economies families hold together with shared calendars and goodwill. When Sophie came back, she wore my old college sweatshirt like armor. Ethan brought me the dog's leash and said he'd handle the morning walk. That's how boys his age say, "I've got you." At the door, I knelt to their eye level. "Here's the deal," I said. "We tell the truth. We take the next right step. We let professionals help where they can. And we don't let this decide who we are." Sophie nodded, red-eyed but present. Ethan's hand found mine and squeezed once. Small hands can anchor a large man. When the deadbolt clicked behind them, I felt something settle. My heart didn't heal. My spine did. I met the private investigator, Daniel Brooks, at a coffee place that still uses real mugs. He looked like every Midwestern uncle at Thanksgiving. Quiet, tidy, eyes that notice. I slid a folder across the table. Claire's travel emails, credit card statements I hadn't wanted to study, a photo of the lakefront hotel. "I need everything," I said. "No guesses. I want facts I can stand on when the ground moves." He nodded like a mechanic who's seen 1,000 broken timing belts. "I'll confirm timelines, locations, witnesses," he said. "I won't speculate." That line mattered. Men my age have been burned by guesses. We shook hands, and I walked to my truck feeling the strange relief that comes when you finally stop pretending the noise in the engine is probably nothing. As I buckled in, my phone buzzed with a school reminder about Ethan's math test. Ordinary life kept tapping my shoulder. I answered it, because that's what dads do, and then I let Daniel go hunt the truth. 3 days later, Daniel called me back to the same table, same mugs. He laid out a binder with the kind of patience you use for a kid's science fair board. 7 months, he said, and the number sat heavy. Wisconsin, Michigan, New York. Tuesdays and Thursdays at the lakefront. Photos of them laughing in a parking garage. Receipts from places I've driven past with the kids. He had printed phone logs, not content, just timestamps that tell their own story if you let them. He spoke in the tone of a weather report. No drama, just the storm's path. I marked dates I remembered. Sophie's braces came off. They celebrated at a hotel bar. Ethan's school concert. She flew out early for Detroit. The room didn't spin. It stacked. You know that feeling when you finally find the source of a leak behind drywall? Relief and anger at the same time. Daniel closed the binder and asked, "Do you want the copies?" I said yes. Paper doesn't forget. Daniel's next page was thinner but louder. Notes from interviews. "Mark Caldwell has history," he said. "Prior workplaces, similar behavior, married co-workers, rumors that follow like smoke." "Sterling Marketing hired him anyway," Daniel added, "because of a big account he brought." That's when the anger changed shape. Not hot, not loud, structural. I've run a business. I know the temptation to ignore a rattle when the car is still moving. But when leadership signs off on a risk they can see, that's not a rattle. That's a loose wheel. I thought about HR trainings Claire complained about, the irony of sitting through slides while living the counterexample. Daniel tapped the folder. This is corroborated by more than one person. I didn't cheer. I adjusted my expectations. The problem wasn't only a man who couldn't keep his boundaries. It was also a door that kept being propped open for him. Document it all, I said. The mini-climax wasn't rage. It was resolve. Negligence has a paper trail, too. That afternoon, the doorbell brought Victoria Caldwell, Claire's sister, carrying a tote like she was arriving for a weekend. She needs to come home, David. Being with family will help her heal, she said, trying to step past me. I held the frame with one hand. This isn't her home anymore, I answered, calm as a level resting on wood. She blinked, then pivoted to the script I've heard at backyard parties. It was a mistake. She's hurting. You're being cold. I've been called colder things by people who didn't want to admit what burned them. Victoria, I said, one mistake is a wrong turn. 7 months is a map. She accused me of throwing away 16 years in a fit. I pointed to the suitcase on the porch. I'm not throwing. I'm sorting. The dog stood beside me like a quiet witness. She realized she wasn't getting in and hissed, "You'll regret this." I shook my head once. I regret what she did. I won't regret protecting my kids. The next morning, Victoria tried a new lane. History rewrites. You were distant, always working. She needed connection, she said over the phone, like she was reading from a blog. Anyone over 40 knows this rhythm. Cause, justify, minimize. The problem is it pretends adults don't have other options. Counseling, honesty, a hard conversation at the kitchen table. Don't deliver her choices to my doorstep with my name on the label, I said. I'm not signing. She fired back. You think you're perfect? No, I said. I think I didn't cheat. A pause stretched, the kind that tells you you've hit the actual point. I ended the call by suggesting we keep communication to logistics about Claire's health and the kids. Boundary isn't punishment, it's furniture. You decide where things go so you can walk through your own house without stubbing your toe. I set the phone down and breathed like I was lifting something heavy. The climax was private. The first day I didn't argue with a fantasy. Early afternoon, I got a call from a number my phone labeled Unknown Chicago. David Mercer, this is Robert Kane, CEO at Sterling Marketing. His voice had the careful weight of a man who counts commas for a living. I want to express our regret for what has occurred, he began, then moved smoothly to the business. Mark Caldwell had been terminated, effective immediately. Policy violations. We take these matters seriously, he said, and I could hear the PR team standing just out of frame. I asked the only question that mattered to a father. Is Claire safe from workplace pressure? He assured me she'd been offered leave and support. He did not say lawsuit, but the word sat between us like a third party. When we hung up, I didn't feel victory. I felt the truth of how companies respond. Fast when the light is on them, slow when it's just a hallway whisper. I wrote down the time of the call. Paper for everything, even the polite parts. That evening, I met attorney James Porter in an office that smelled like old books and new coffee. He listened the way good men in their 50s listen. No interruptions, a pen moving just enough to keep pace with facts. First, secure your finances, he said. Close joint credit lines, divide savings, document all assets and debts. Second, decide if you want separation or divorce. Fault can matter here. I asked the questions every dad asks. What about the kids? What does a judge actually look at? He laid it out. Stability, involvement, school, medical, who gets them to practice, who meets with teachers, who keeps their days from collapsing. No showboating, just a rubric life can live inside. He didn't promise me wins. He promised me process. I slid him Daniel's binder. This is the spine, I said. He nodded, weighted in his hands like a craftsman testing a board. We'll build on it. The climax was a signature retainer and a calm plan that didn't need anger to stand. The next morning, I called the counselor at my kids' school. I didn't want gossip. I wanted eyes that care. I explained the basics without the tabloid. Their mom is in the hospital. There's marital trouble. Watch for dips in grades. Flash anger. Quiet kids who used to raise their hands. She thanked me for being upfront and promised to loop in teachers discreetly. I scheduled sessions with the school psychologist too. Men our age sometimes resist that word. I've learned it's just another kind of coach. Before we hung up, the counselor said, "We'll keep routine steady. Routine helps." She's right. Routine is scaffolding while the wall cures. I packed extra snacks in Ethan's bag, texted Sophie a dumb dad joke about pop quizzes, and left 5 minutes early so no one had to sprint to first period. None of that makes headlines. It makes a home. The climax was small. 2 kids who walked into school on time, shoulders a little straighter than yesterday. Claire texted, "I need some things." I answered with a time window and told her I'd set a suitcase on the porch. Boundaries sound mean to people who prefer fog. They're merciful to children who need clear weather. I packed clothes, toiletries, her favorite sweater, and the framed photo of the kids at the lake, because truth doesn't erase history. It sets it down gently and moves forward. When she arrived, I didn't open the door. I stepped onto the porch and handed her the suitcase. She looked smaller than the story I'd built around her. "We can fix this," she said. "People do." "Sometimes," I answered, "but they don't start by pretending the last 7 months were a misprint." She reached for my arm. I stepped back and kept my voice low. "The kids will see you when they're ready, with structure." She swallowed and nodded like someone who doesn't agree but understands the rules on the field. The door closed with a click that sounded like a line being drawn. She tried again the next day by phone, using the phrase I've heard at church small groups and in magazine articles my barber keeps on the counter. People recover from affairs. I didn't argue with the category. I argued with the details. People also recover from surgery, I said, but not when the wound stays open and the patient keeps running marathons. She went quiet, then played the nostalgia reel. First apartment, broken couch, groceries we couldn't afford. I remember all of it. That's why this hurts where it does. Recovery needs 2 honest people, I said. We're not there. She cried. I let her, not out of cruelty, but because men in our bracket finally learned the difference between comfort and rescue. I'll share the kids' schedule through the attorney, I added. Please do the same. The call ended without a slammed door. That felt new. The climax was in my pocket, a phone that didn't buzz for an hour, and a house that exhaled. When she came by to swap insurance cards and sign a school form, I kept us on the porch again. She floated another attempt to minimize, a rough patch. Mistakes were made. I didn't raise my voice. I raised the facts. "I know everything, Claire. The hotels, the receipts, the Thursday nights, the flights disguised as retreats." Her face changed in the way people's faces change when they realize the conversation has a ledger. "Who told you?" "Paper," I said. "Paper told me." She tried to redirect to the kids. "Don't turn them against me." "I won't," I said. "Your actions will do their own math." That line isn't clever. It's arithmetic. She looked past me into the house like she could see the shadows of our life moving without her. I didn't fill the silence. Sometimes silence is the only honest sound left. The mini-climax was a pen scratching on an insurance form, proof that even on bad days, we can still complete what's required. I heard the car before I saw it, the idling engine of a man who thinks he's braver than he is. Mark Caldwell stepped out in a pressed shirt like it could cover what it couldn't. Claire glanced at me, then back at him, the guilt and defiance wrestling in her shoulders. I moved down one stair, placing myself between them and the front door. No shouting, no puffed chest, just a husband deciding where the property line of his piece is. "You need to leave," I said to him, voice even. He lifted his hands like a man in a training video. "I just want to explain." "You've explained enough," I answered. He took a half step anyway, the kind men take when they've won too many small arguments. My jaw tightened. The dog stood up behind me and let out a single low sound. Claire whispered, "Mark, don't." He looked at her, then at me, and understood the math. He backed away. The climax was simple. My home stayed my home. Mark smirked like a man who'd never been told no. He took one more step onto my driveway and said my first name like he owned a piece of it. I didn't lecture, I didn't puff up. I warned him once, leave. He rolled his eyes and muttered something about grown-ups talking. That's when the line moved from polite to necessary. One punch, clean, not wild, landed and sent him backward across the concrete. My hand burned, but not as much as the months that brought us here. Claire gasped, and I heard the neighbor's screen door click. I didn't chase him. I didn't gloat. "Get off my property," I said, and meant more than the grass. He staggered to his car, pride louder than pain. Claire looked at me like she didn't recognize the quiet version of anger. I opened the door just enough to keep my home a home. The climax was not the punch. It was the boundary holding. After they left, the house felt like a church after a funeral. Flowers still breathing, silence learning its way around the furniture. I walked through the rooms like an usher closing up. The kids' sneakers by the back door, a half-finished puzzle on the coffee table, the dog asleep like nothing in his world had shifted. I collected the spare keys I'd given Claire from the bowl, set them in a drawer, and felt the smallest click inside. Order creeping back in. I took out the trash, because life is still Tuesday even when your marriage isn't. I brewed coffee I didn't want, listened to the drip, and thought about the old advice men give each other. Don't make big decisions, angry or drunk. I wasn't either. I was clear. I stood by the window and watched the late sun find dust in the air. It looked like snow in a cheap Christmas globe. The climax was simple. The house finally matched the truth. That evening I called the kids to the table and set my phone face down. "We need to talk about what happens next," I said, and heard my voice land on the wood. I explained divorce without adding scenery. No character attacks, no legal theater. "It means Mom and I won't be married anymore," I said. "You'll live here most of the time. You'll see her with a schedule." Sophie folded into herself the way girls do when they feel older than they wanted to be. Ethan stared at the knot in the tabletop like it could come loose. "Does this mean we did something?" he asked. "No," I said, quick and soft. "This is on us, not you." I laid out the next few weeks like a road map. Therapy appointments, school steady, weekends planned in pencil. They asked if Christmas would still be Christmas. "Yes," I said. "Maybe smaller. Definitely honest." We stood up together, and I hugged them both. The climax was a promise, and a calendar we could live in. We agreed on a supervised lunch at a family place near school. Plastic booths, crayons, the kind of menu kids can trust. I brought my sister to sit 2 tables over. Claire arrived, and 5 minutes later Mark slid in beside her like this was a rehearsal dinner. My sister texted one word: no. I walked to the host stand and asked for the manager, then to the parking lot, calm, even, the way men my age ask for refunds without making scenes. "This wasn't the deal," I told Claire. "You don't bring him." She looked torn, then stubborn. Sophie pressed closer to me. "I don't like him," she whispered. Not angry. Sure. Ethan's hands balled in his jacket pockets. I ended it clean. "We're done here." No shouting. I paid for 2 sodas and some untouched fries and walked the kids to the car. Claire stood by the door looking like a person who finally felt the temperature. The climax was in my rear view. 2 kids whose dad chose them. A week later, James Porter forwarded a countersuit from Claire's attorney. Alienation, hostile environment, a demand for half my company as if it were a pizza. I've built a business through midnights and missed fishing trips. I won't let someone take half because a sentence on letterhead says so. James and I sat shoulder to shoulder at his conference table while he translated the formal words into what courts actually weigh. "We respond with receipts," he said. "Your involvement with the kids, your finances kept separate, her documented choices." In my head I heard my dad's voice from decades ago. Measure twice, cut once. We measured everything. Emails with teachers, orthodontist bills, bank statements, volunteer logs from Ethan's baseball league. I didn't rant. I stacked. When James printed the draft response, the pages came out warm, like bread. We signed and sent it back through the same machine that had tried to turn my life into a headline. The climax was ink, calm, black, final on the page. A court-appointed guardian ad litem met us in a room with soft chairs and hard truths. She spoke to Sophie first, then Ethan, then me alone. She asked practical questions older adults respect. Who makes breakfast? Who schedules appointments? Who helps with homework when the Wi-Fi dies? She listened the way a good nurse listens, taking notes you can't read but can feel. Ethan said it plain. "I don't want to see Mom right now." Sophie added conditions like a thoughtful 15-year-old. Public places, no surprises, definitely no Mark. I didn't coach them. I sat there with my palms open and let our real life testify. When it was my turn, I kept my answers short. No speeches, just the pattern of our days. The guardian closed her notebook and said, "Thank you for keeping the kids' needs central." It wasn't a victory lap. It was a nod from a referee who saw the play clearly. The climax, their voices counted, on the record. James started making calls, teachers, coaches, our pastor who has seen us more on potluck Sundays than Christmas, my office manager who knows I leave early on game days. None of them were character assassins, they were historians. They submitted statements that sounded like us. He shows up. He communicates. He's steady. Nobody used fancy words. They used verbs, drives, attends, signs, listens. Meanwhile, Claire's side gathered friends who remembered the version of me that works long hours. They weren't wrong. They were incomplete. James put the stack together without perfume. "Courts don't want saints," he said. "They want schedules and evidence." I brought in the family calendar we've lived by for years. Color-coded boxes, sticky notes, the month we survived the flu without missing a mortgage. He smiled. "This is better than a speech." The climax wasn't applause, it was weight. Our file weighed more because it held actual days. Daniel Brooks returned with the expanded binder. Photos, timestamps, mileage logs, hotel folios, and the kind of cross-reference that would make an auditor nod. He didn't dramatize. He narrated. Thursday nights at the lakefront. Weekends labeled girls' trips that matched Mark's expense reports. A selfie from a brewery in Michigan that revealed his jacket in the window reflection. Little things, like the way truth hides in the corner of a frame. We added airline confirmations that didn't match Claire's conference registrations. We added childcare texts where she thanked me for covering another emergency, and I wrote back, "Proud of you, ignorant and sincere." I initialed each exhibit like a man building something that needed every screw tightened. Daniel closed the binder and pushed it across as if knighting me with facts. It was heavy in my hands, not because of paper, but because denial had no shelf left. The climax, a spine of evidence that wouldn't bend. My phone buzzed with a number I didn't know. "Mr. Mercer, this is Anna Torres. I used to work at Sterling with Claire." She wasn't hunting drama. She sounded tired and ready to tell the truth. She explained Mark's reputation preceded him. Whispers at his last job, HR notes that weren't rumors. "People raised flags," she said, "and leadership waved them down because he brought in a big pharma account." It landed like another kind of betrayal, the institutional kind older adults recognize when budgets win over people. I asked if she'd put it in writing. She paused, then said yes. "It's not about you," she added. "It's about the next woman." I thanked her without turning her into a weapon. After we hung up, I sat in my truck and watched a dad tie a cleat for his kid on the curb. You protect where you can. Sometimes that means making sure doors don't stay propped open. The climax. A witness chose daylight. Anna's statement wasn't a firework. It was a fuse. James read it twice, then pulled HR policies from Sterling's public site and lined them up against what Anna described. If leadership ignored documented concerns, he said, that's more than a bad hire, that's negligence. He explained how patterns matter, prior complaints, known risks, power dynamics. I thought about those corporate emails that open with, "We value safety and respect," then close with bonuses for the rainmaker. We weren't trying to turn my personal pain into a jackpot. We were trying to make sure the structure that enabled it couldn't shrug and walk away. James drafted a notice to add Sterling to the case, careful with language, firm on facts. I signed it with a steady hand. We didn't announce it on social media. We filed it the way grown-ups send certified letters. Quiet, trackable, undeniable. The climax. Responsibility got a second address. We filed the amended complaint on a Thursday. By Friday morning, an attorney for Sterling called James with the voice of someone used to solving problems by lunchtime. He wanted to understand our position. James invited the conversation and named the exhibits calmly. Anna's statement, Daniel's corroborations, policy pages, timelines, no threats. Just a ledger. I sat there listening, not speaking, like a homeowner while the contractor and the inspector discussed the beam that failed. When the call ended, James turned his chair toward me. "They'll want this to go away," he said. "They may propose a settlement that includes confidentiality. We'll decide based on leverage and what protects your family." I didn't feel triumphant. I felt like a man who had finally placed each tool back on the pegboard in the right outline. The climax wasn't the filing, it was the moment they realized we'd done our homework. The offer arrived fast: money, confidentiality, removal from the suit. James walked me through numbers and non-monetary terms like a neighbor helping you read a mortgage. "This doesn't erase what happened," he said. "It recognizes exposure." I asked myself the questions men in our bracket ask. Will this protect the kids? Will this keep their names out of headlines? Will this force the system to respect its own rules next time? We negotiated for language that mattered: acknowledgement without spin, commitments to training and oversight that weren't just posters in hallways. When we signed, I didn't feel rich. I felt exact. I texted Sophie that I'd make tacos, texted Ethan to grab shredded cheese on his way home. Life turned the page the way it always does, quietly. The climax was not the check. It was the admission inside the silence. What broke us wasn't only a man. It was a door someone left unlocked. Claire called late, tears already mid-sentence. "You're destroying my life," she said, like I'd pushed a domino she hadn't set up. Men my age know that tone. It chases cause with effect like headlights chasing taillights. I stood at the kitchen sink, hands on the cool edge, and kept my voice level. "No, Claire, you destroyed it. I'm just refusing to live inside the wreckage." She said I'd turned the kids against her. I reminded her I'd told them the truth once and then shut my mouth. "They're drawing their own lines," I said. The dog shifted at my feet. The dishwasher hummed. Regular life kept doing its quiet job. She hung there between anger and pleading, and I didn't step in to choose for her. "Get help," I said. "For you, not for optics." The silence on the line lengthened, a rope letting out. She finally whispered, "I don't know how." "Start by not blaming," I said. The climax was the click. She ended the call. The next day she texted, "Did you ever love me?" It's the kind of question that dares you to lie. I typed and deleted like a man sanding a rough board, then sent what was true. "I love the woman I thought you were." It read cold, but it was accurate. There's a grief older adults understand. You can mourn a person who is still breathing. I remembered our first apartment, the drafty window, the couch that sat uneven because of a missing foot. We ate cereal for dinner and used upside-down books as coasters. I loved that girl. I loved the mornings we counted pennies for gas and still laughed. The woman who checked into a hotel under Tuesdays and Thursdays? I didn't know her. She wrote back, "That's cruel." I set the phone down and stared at the wall calendar, all those little boxes we used to share. "It's honest," I said to the empty room. The climax was accepting that truth doesn't hug. A week later, the court's order arrived. Joint legal custody, primary physical with me, scheduled weekends, and a weekly dinner for Claire. The language was clinical, but the meaning was family-sized. I told the kids at the table we've spilled milk on 100 times. "This keeps school steady," I said. "It gives you predictability." Sophie relaxed a hair, the way a teenager does when the ground under her stops shaking. Ethan asked if scheduled meant he could say no sometimes. "We'll listen to your counselor," I answered. We taped the schedule to the fridge like a season's game plan. I texted Claire a picture of it and asked her to confirm pickups. She sent back a thumbs up, then a heart, then nothing else. I folded the court paper and slid it into the drawer with birth certificates and passports, the place where things live that define us but don't explain us. The climax. We had a blueprint that could carry weight. The divorce hearing took less time than it takes to oil a hinge. We sat with our lawyers, answered questions with "Yes, Your Honor," and watched the judge sign something that had been true for months. Mark was gone from her life by then. Jobs end when spotlights stay on too long. When we stepped into the hallway, Claire touched the wall like she needed it to hold. "So this is it," she said. I nodded. We weren't dramatic. Adults rarely are in fluorescent light. Outside, the air felt like mid-Illinois in late fall, cool, direct, not interested in arguments. I texted my sister I'd grabbed the kids from practice and asked if she needed anything from the store. "Paper towels," she wrote back. There's comfort in errands. On the drive home, the radio played a song we used to hum on road trips. I didn't turn it off. I let it be a relic, not a compass. The climax was 4 words from the judge. Dissolution is entered. Claire asked to meet at a coffee shop with a lamp that leans too far over each table. She looked down and said what I think she meant. I'm sorry, for all of it. I believed the sorrow. I didn't mistake it for repair. I'm sorry for the loss, I said back. Not for the choices. She winced. There's a difference you don't feel until you're on the hook for the bill. We talked logistics, the kid's counselor, drop-offs, who carries health insurance, no blame volley, no warm nostalgia, just 2 people co-parenting from opposite banks. As we stood, she reached for a hug, then let her hand fall. I didn't move first. Not out of spite, out of accuracy. In the parking lot, I watched her dig for keys in a bag that used to hold our weekends. I whispered the shortest prayer I know. Help us not to hurt them. The climax was a boundary kept without a fight. Then the misses started. A text 10 minutes before pickup. Running late. An hour. Can't make it. The kids rode the roller coaster. Hope, watch, crash. I kept my voice steady. We don't climb aboard other people's schedules, I told them. We live ours. I documented in a notebook, dates, times, reasons, because courts prefer ink to stories. On the 3rd miss in a month, Sophie said, I'm tired of being the grown-up. Ethan shrugged in that 13-year-old way that's half shield, half spear. I made grilled cheese and tomato soup, the meal that forgives most days, and we ate with the TV off. After dishes, I emailed our attorney and the counselor, not to punish, just to protect. Claire called later, words slipping like socks on tile. I'm fine, she insisted. I didn't argue. Get help, I said again. The climax was smaller than disappointment. The kids went to bed on time, and the house held. Victoria called from a number I now recognize the way you recognize a pothole on your commute. She needs compassion, she said, urgent and heavy. She needs family, not paperwork. I stood by the back door looking at the grill cover flapping in a breeze. I called Dr. Helen Foster, I told her. Claire needs treatment, not a couch to hide on. Victoria accused me of being hard. Boundaries aren't hard, I said. They're humane. They keep people from burning the same hand on the same stove. She went quiet, then softer. She's talking dark. I listened without taking the bait of panic that turns you into a firefighter without water. If you believe she's a danger to herself, I said, call the hotline or 911. Don't call me to carry a weight I can't lift. It sounded cold. It wasn't. I had 2 kids doing homework at the table behind me. The climax was a decision. Compassion without rescue missions. The doorbell at 2:17 a.m. makes a sound you don't forget. Officer Bennett and Officer Ramirez stood on my porch with the posture of men trained to hold bad news carefully. Mr. Mercer, may we come in? I nodded and led them to the living room where the couch has seen birthdays and strep throat and movie nights. There was a single vehicle accident on Lakeshore Drive, Bennett said. Your ex-wife was the driver. She did not survive. The words rearranged the furniture in my chest. I didn't fall. I sat. Ramirez explained blood alcohol, speed, no other cars, no passengers. The facts tried to hand me a narrative. I refused it. They asked who to notify. I gave them Victoria's number and thanked them for their work, the kind of courtesy that feels strange and right at the same time. When they left, the house felt too quiet for the size of the news. The climax was a sentence I said to the empty room. I have to tell the kids. By morning, Victoria called. Her voice was the sound of a bridge under weight. They found a note, she said. It's addressed to you and the kids. She brought it over in a manila envelope like a report card no one wants to open. We stood on the porch because the porch is where truths should meet daylight. I opened it and saw Claire's handwriting, the tilt I know from grocery lists and birthday cards. I didn't read it there. I thanked Victoria, asked if she had someone with her, and watched her drive away slow. Inside, I sat at the kitchen table, the one I wiped down 100 times, and read. It wasn't poetry, it was plain, responsibility taken, apologies without bargains, love for the kids stated like math, not music. It didn't fix a mile. It marked one. I folded it back into the envelope and placed it in the drawer with the serious papers. The climax was a choice. Save it for when they ask. I read it again alone that night. "You were right," she wrote. "I threw away what mattered. Thomas never loved me. Even if he had, it wouldn't excuse what I did." She wrote to Sophie and Ethan too, with the clean lines of a mother who finally put the subject and verb in the right order. There were no instructions, no "if you loved me you woulds," just a recognition of damage and a wish for their wholeness. People our age know that clarity often arrives after the sale is final. I didn't cry hard. I let my face do its work, and then stopped. I didn't canonize her. I didn't curse her. I held the paper like a small, warm truth that came late but still mattered. I slid it into a plastic sleeve, labeled it with the date, and wrote a note to my future self. Show them when they ask, not before. The climax was restraint, honoring the truth without turning it into a monument. I called them into the living room and turned off the TV. "I have hard news," I said, and watched their bodies shift into the posture of bravery. "Mom died last night in a car accident." The words didn't bounce, they landed. Sophie folded forward, soundless, then sound found her. Ethan went still, eyes fixed on a spot past me like he was holding up a wall. I moved to the floor so I could be at their level. We cried together the way families do when no one is auditioning. When the storm eased, I said the next part with care. "There's a note from Mom. We'll read it when you're ready. Not today. When you say." They nodded, each in their own language. Ethan asked the practical questions. Funeral, school, who to tell. Sophie asked the spiritual ones. Was she sorry? Did she know we loved her? "Yes," I said to both sets. The climax was a group hug that nobody tried to escape. Funerals are logistics wrapped in memories. I chose a simple service with a pastor who tells the truth gently. People who knew pieces of our story lined up with casseroles and soft eyes. No mark. Thank God. I stood beside Sophie and Ethan at the graveside while the wind pushed at our coats like a polite usher. When the pastor said the final words, Sophie's hand found mine and squeezed once. Signal received. Ethan stepped closer, shoulder against mine. I didn't make a speech. I didn't pretend this was noble. I let one clean tear fall and didn't wipe it too fast. On the drive home, we stopped for burgers because hunger and grief keep separate calendars. At the table, we remembered a good day with Claire. One, then another. We didn't rewrite the ending. We rounded out the story. That night, after they fell asleep, I checked the locks, turned off the porch light, and stood in the quiet house. The climax. We were still here. That first quiet Sunday, Sophie sat beside me on the back steps where the paint always peels by July. She traced a crack with her finger and whispered, "You lost someone too." Adults know that sentence carries permission. I nodded and told her about the girl her mom used to be, the yard sale hunter, the karaoke daredevil, the midnight pancake maker. "I miss that version," I said. "I miss who I thought we'd be at 70. She leaned her head on my shoulder like she did when she was 6 and thunderstorms felt bigger. We didn't try to fix anything. We watched the neighbor's sprinkler tick across the fence and let the water sound like breathing. I told her grief has 2 pedals, love and reality, and we tap each as we need. She asked if it ever stops hurting. "It gets organized," I said. The climax was a small, steady thing, my daughter seeing her father's grief and not being asked to carry it. That night, Ethan stood in the doorway holding the dog like a kid carries a backpack he won't admit is heavy. "Was she really sorry?" he asked, eyes stubborn and wet. I sat on the edge of his bed and answered the way men our age respect, plain. "Yes, the note says so. Clear, not bargaining." He stared at the ceiling fan and worked the math only boys can do. Action, consequence, intent. "Too late, though," he said. "Too late," I agreed. We talked about apologies that repair and apologies that record. Both matter, only one changes tomorrow. He asked when he could read the note. "When you're ready," I said. "Not because I say so, because you say so." He nodded once, the kind of nod you give a coach who explains the drill without shouting. I tucked the blanket under his feet like I did when he was small. The climax was a rule we could live by. Truth now, paperwork later. We started therapy the way you start walking after a sprain, careful, a little skeptical, then grateful. A family session on Tuesdays, individual slots for each of us. The counselor didn't chase big dramatic moments. She asked about mornings, bedtimes, school pickup lines, and what dads forget at the grocery store. Cilantro, always cilantro. She gave us simple tools. Name the feeling, ask for the need, take the smallest next action. It sounded like maintenance, not magic. Exactly what families over 30 understand. I learned to pause before fixing, to say, that's hard, and mean it, and to let a quiet minute do its work. Sophie found words for waves that used to knock her down. Ethan learned exits that weren't slamming doors. We left each session with one assignment, never 5. Progress looked boring on purpose. The climax was a midweek evening where nobody cried, nobody shouted, and homework got finished with only one lost charger. At dinner, we practiced telling the story of their mom in a way the future could live with. We named good memories out loud, pumpkin patches, the year the cookies burned twice, and we didn't airbrush the end. We keep the truth, I said, so the truth can keep us. I hung one photo in the hallway where we pass it a dozen times a day, not a shrine, just a chapter. When the kids asked how to answer friends, I offered a short sentence. Our family went through something hard, we're getting help. No gossip, no heroics, just a handle they could hold without dropping. At church, a woman tried to corner Sophie with, "What really happened?" My daughter looked at me, then back at the woman and said, "We're sticking to short answers." We walked to the car and high-fived like we'd survived a pop quiz. The climax was control, owning our version without renting space to rumors. A few weeks later, Sophie said it soft, almost guilty. I'm starting to forget her voice. Every adult knows that guilt. It tricks you into thinking memory equals loyalty. We sat on the porch swing and played old voicemails, the ordinary kind, reminders about milk, a laugh about a dumb commercial. We listened once, not 10 times. Voices fade, I said, but meanings don't. We wrote down 3 sentences that still guide us. Be on time, bring a jacket, say thank you. They sound small. They hold a lot. Sophie smiled and admitted she still hears her mom when she overpacks. We put the phone away and watched the evening catch in the maple like it always does. I told her the brain saves what it needs to move forward. That's not betrayal. That's survival. The climax was a decision. Let memory work like light, enough to see by, not so much it blinds. I eased back into my firm like a man rejoining a pickup basketball game. No hero ball, just clean passes. I told my team I'd be present but not performative. Mornings were for the kids, afternoons for clients, evenings for dinner that didn't come in a bag. I delegated the projects that liked to eat weekends and kept the ones that liked to be solved by lunch. I said no more often and watched respect, not resentment, show up. Older adults know the trick. Consistency beats spectacle. When a client pushed for a late call, I countered with 7 a.m. and stuck to it. We lost one account that wanted a magician. We kept 3 that wanted a grown-up. On Friday, I brought home a small win and a bigger energy level. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt useful. The climax was my calendar, white space where panic used to live, proof that showing up beats showing off. One Saturday, I took every photo off the walls and laid them on the dining table like a museum planning a new wing. I kept the ones that told our kids who they are. First bike, first day of school, muddy cleats by the back door. I boxed the rest with a note for later eyes. Not erasing, reorganizing, I told Ethan when he wandered in for cereal. He nodded and stole a marshmallow from the baking jar. We hung fewer frames, straighter, with more room for what comes next. A graduation, a dog that sleeps in every picture, a porch rebuild that finally happens. Sophie chose a black and white of the 3 of us at the lake and centered it in the hallway. We stepped back and let the house exhale. Homes carry stories. They don't have to carry every scene. The climax was a nail going in clean on the first swing. Order without pretending. I bought a fireproof safe, not because we're fancy, but because some papers deserve more than a drawer. Birth certificates, passports, the deed, and the envelope with Claire's note. I told the kids where it lives and why. When you're 18, I said, you can read it alone, or we can read it together. Your choice. We practiced the plan like a fire drill. Calm, predictable, nobody shouting the steps. Then we stopped talking about it. The point wasn't suspense, it was stewardship. I added a smaller envelope addressed to my future self. Don't rush them, don't stage it, be there. It felt like leaving instructions for a decent man I hope to be. I slid the safe under the bed where dust bunnies hold their meetings and went back to making dinner. The climax was a click you can't hear on audio, a father choosing timing over drama. By early fall, the neighborhood stopped pausing when we walked the dog. People waved without that tilt of the head that asks for the inside version. Ethan rejoined his baseball practice. Sophie helped at a bake sale and came home smelling like cinnamon and sunlight. I grilled on Saturdays and overcooked the chicken once because traditions need humility. The mailman asked about the Cubs. I answered about pitching. Normal is underrated until you lose it. We brought brownies to the couple who just had twins, and I fixed a wobbly porch step for Mrs. Green because some problems you can solve with a screwdriver. At night, the kids did homework at the table while I answered a few emails, and the dog learned our new rhythm like he'd known it all along. The climax was tiny. Laughter from 2 rooms at once. No explanation needed, no one checking the clock. Our victories shrank on purpose. Hot cereal on a cold morning, a clean uniform found on the first try, a dentist visit where nobody cried, including me. I taught Ethan how to change a tire on a Saturday and let him do the last lug nut so the story would be his. Sophie cooked spaghetti and used too much garlic, and now that's the way we make spaghetti. We built a budget that didn't sprint but never limped. I said yes to a fishing trip I would have punted before and came home with a sunburn and a kid who talked the whole drive back. It wasn't a movie montage. It was a ledger of ordinary plus ordinary until it added up to good. The climax was bedtime. 3 doors, 3 breaths, a house that slept without checking the lock twice. One evening on the back porch, after the cicadas settled into their late summer choir, I realized the payoff wasn't clever. I didn't win revenge. I won room. Room for my kids to learn trust by watching it. Room for me to be a father who doesn't rehearse speeches in the mirror. Room for tomorrow to show up without tiptoeing. I thought about the men I know, divorces, layoffs, knees that ache in the rain, and how we measure victory wrong when we're young. These days, winning looks like a calendar that holds, a car that starts, a table with 3 plates and seconds available. I looked at the porch light haloing the rail and said it out loud because sometimes you need to hear yourself admit it. My job was never payback. It was protection. The climax was quiet but certain. My spine stayed straight, and my kids felt safe enough to laugh. I used to think this story was about forgiveness. It isn't. It's about truth, the kind you can stand on when the floor gives way. My wife cheated, lied, and died in a tragedy I wouldn't wish on anyone. I can't fix that. What I could do, and did, was choose. I chose dignity over drama, protection over payback, clear words over comforting lies. The binder of evidence, the court orders, the porch light left on for 2 kids who still have homework and practice, those became my proof of love. Some cracks don't close, but houses still stand with cracks, if the beams are right. Tonight the dog settles, the fridge hums, and my children laugh from 2 rooms at once. That's the payoff. Not triumph, but steadiness. Not a perfect ending, but a livable tomorrow. If a father can stay upright after a storm, his kids learn the shape of courage by watching. If you believe dignity is a man's greatest strength, drop a comment. Stand tall.